I don't want to get sued for that because I know enough stand-ups and they're very territorial about things like that.
Hi, and welcome to Pizza Quest. I'm Peter Reinhardt. We're here today with Arthur Bavino and Alfred Schultz, the co-creators of the Pizza Pod Party, which just finished its first year of 52 episodes. You guys are coming out of New York City, and you've had some really amazing guests, and you're about to launch your second season. So I want to hear more about that. But let me just tell our followers a little bit about each of you. Arthur is a restaurant, food media, and travel writer, and the author of Buffalo Everything, a guide to eating in Nickel City. So we want to hear more about that a little bit. Are you originally from Buffalo?
No, I'm from Long Island originally, yeah.
But somehow you narrowed in on Buffalo.
It's all pizza. It's all pizza, Peter. It happened because of pizza.
Pizza, and Buffalo has its own distinctive pizza. We have a Buffalo pizza place down here in Charlotte where I am. You're also the Daily Meal's founding Eat and Dine editor, a graduate of New York City's International Culinary Institute, and you've appeared on the Today Show on ABC News and has written for the New York Times. And if I'm not mistaken, you are responsible for the annual 101 Best Pizzas list, which we want to hear about more a little bit later. Now, your partner in crime, Alfred Schultz, is a radio personality, a stand-up comic, a podcaster, and once upon a time used to do a segment on Allison Rosen's podcast or stream called Things You Never Hear People Say. So I want to hear more about that in a little bit, Alfred. But now he's the co-host and executive producer of the Pizza Pod Party, where he and Arthur have posted 52 episodes already. That means once a week. If it's a year at 52, that's pretty good. That's quite a pace. And you're about to launch a second season of Pizza Pod Party. So welcome, guys, and thanks for joining us on Pizza Quest.
Thank you, Peter. I just want to say thank you. You know, I've been following you for a long time, and following your pizza journey. So it's an honor to be here with you talking about pizza.
And thank you so much for having us, Peter. I'm honored to be here. I don't have the credibility to be here with my pizza knowledge, but I also want to make sure that people realize I am not a stand-up comedian. So I don't want people to be, I don't want to get sued for that because I know enough stand-ups and they're very territorial about things like that. So.
Right. I understand. Yeah. I just saw it somewhere in one of your bios that said something about you had done some kind of a stand-up show.
Well, the show I used to work on was called Stand Up with Pete Dominic, which is one of the shows I've produced. So yeah, it's confusing. I'll try to be funny to make up for it, but we'll see.
We're going to count on that. And also, as you get ready to start your second season, we want to hear about some of the guests you're having. But before we do, since you've been chronicling your own pizza quests across various media platforms, and before we talk about the upcoming season, tell us about one or two of your favorite and maybe most surprising discoveries during your own search for the perfect pizza. And then, Alfred, maybe you can also tell us a little bit about what are some of the things you never hear people say, especially when it comes to pizza.
Well, there's a lot to chew on there, pun intended. So I would say in terms of things that we learned, one thing I think that we've learned throughout the process on sort of a macro level is that we try to get people who aren't in the food world to talk about pizza. Sometimes you'll get someone who immediately says, oh, I know a lot about pizza, and you have a very sort of foodie conversation. Sometimes we book a guest who's great, and they'll say, look, I would love to come on, but I don't have that much to say about pizza. I think one thing we've learned in this process is that almost no matter who you are, you have opinions about pizza, and it also informs the listeners about who you are as a person. So if you go through someone's life and they talk about where they grew up and the kind of pizza they had growing up and sort of how the pizza they eat now, you can learn so much about the person. So I think on a very broad level, that's what we've learned. In terms of what we don't hear people say, that was this segment I used to do on Allison Rosen's podcast where I just would list out like top 10 things you would never hear people say that were just very, very silly. And when it comes to pizza, it's tough because another thing I learned about this podcast or through this podcast is that people's tastes of pizza go all different directions. So there was a period where I thought everyone liked cold pizza. I thought it was a cliche that everyone liked cold pizza. Turns out it's almost a 50-50 divide. A lot of people don't like cold pizza and they have to reheat it. So I'm trying to think of things that you wouldn't hear people say. And, we have people that proselytize pineapple on pizza, which I thought was surprising. So I don't know. I might have to get back to you about something that you would never hear someone say about pizza. The only thing I can think of right now is maybe I hate pizza is something you will never hear someone
rarely
say.
hear people say that. But
Yeah.
but when you said the thing about pineapple, it reminded me that, there for a long time it was like risky for somebody to admit that they liked pineapple on
Yes.
pizza. Now that's kind of flipped around, and now pineapple on pizza is becoming hip, and you're seeing a lot of food writers, go for it. And so maybe we'll come back and circle back to that
Sure.
in a second. The other thing that I thought of when I was even thinking of this question is, do you ever hear anybody admit, especially somebody from New York City, admit that they actually like Chicago deep dish pizza? Now you did I think we did a whole episode on deep dish pizza, right?
Oh yeah, but you know what? You're talking with someone who actually might say that. And I'm from the Chicagoland area. Arthur is from New York, and he's got some pretty, I think, reasonable opinions about Chicago pizza.
Yeah. Well, that's it.
I fall in love with every style of pizza that I research. So, having to actually have firsthand experience in Chicago, eating at a bunch of the storied places and talking with the pizza makers and the pizza experts in Chicago, definitely fell in love with both thin crust, but with Chicago thin and deep dish and all of the other, kind of more niche things that happen in Chicago pizza wise that and the culture that's associated with it. What's not to like to learn more about, a different culture, a different approach to pizza? I would say one of the things that I'm surprised that we haven't encountered in conversations is people talking about eating pizza on the go. I feel like that's something that I would have expected more people to talk about. And maybe it just kind of indicates more my personal firsthand experience with pizza, whether it's grabbing a slice at Penn Station, at Rose's before trying to run to the Long Island Railroad when I was, living out on Long Island a long time ago, or walking down the street, grabbing a quick slice and walking and eating. I feel like that's something that we haven't really talked with. It hasn't come up a lot in conversations, and I'm surprised by that.
I think from people from outside of New York, we think of people walking and eating pizza as a New York thing. Going back to the movie and all that, all the associations, the cliches. Yep. But I have picked up little murmurings here and there that pizza on the go is coming back as a thing, and that there's going to be drive-through pizza places that you can drive up to, like you could drive up to a coffee, cafe type place and get a hot cup. You can drive up and get a hot slice or two, individually prepared. Yeah, it's in the works. It should be launching pretty soon. And
I like that because it gives a different approach to the whole Joe's kind of model, where you think, you've got the foot traffic, and so you've got this built-in foot traffic with a drive-through. So I like that.
And I think, Peter, you're touching upon something that I love about the podcast is that, someone like yourself is so well known and so well versed about, and it can articulate so much about the process and so much about, the sort of foodie elements of pizza. One thing that, because we wanted to be sort of a little different than that, because people like you do such a good job. We want to touch on the culture. And so one thing from me being from the Midwest, moving to New York City is that's exactly the point. For New Yorkers, it's a fact of life, pizza. And you just have it. It's on the go. It's multiple times a week, maybe for a lot of people, at least once a week for most people. I think for most of the country, at least a lot of the country, and it's changing now, but I think a lot of the rest of the country, it's more of an event. So they get pizza a little less, but when they get it, it's a bigger deal. And so I think noticing those trends and noticing that kind of culture and the different way people from around the country intake pizza, I think it's fascinating. And I love finding out about that. So I think you're absolutely right.
Do you think that now that you're kind of a transplanted New Yorker and but from Chicago, so my question is, do you think New Yorkers have come to admit that Chicago has a real serious pizza culture that's equal to the New York pizza culture? Because in Chicago, they take their pizza just as seriously as New Yorkers do.
I would say my quick answer is no. I don't think New Yorkers generally will acknowledge Chicago to that level, but I think people who pay attention absolutely would. I think an everyday person on the street wouldn't. But I think that there's this.
I think food writers, and writers. I think yes, but I think you're right, Alfred. I think generally speaking, most people will have the same Jon Stewart, kind of knee-jerk reaction.
Right.
And I get it, because deep dish, a lot of people's familiarity is the chain of Uno's Pizza Grill, Chicago Pizza Grill, And that is, well, indicative to a certain part of the Chicago pizza culture. It certainly doesn't tell the whole story. It doesn't even tell the whole story about deep dish, really. So I
It's
think
not even the original recipe, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I think you're right about. And again, I think when you say to somebody from outside of Chicago, Chicago pizza, they immediately go to deep dish, not realizing that there's like 5 other styles of pizza out of Chicago that have been very important in the pizza landscape, like the tavern style, the thin crusted tavern style. So, and that's becoming very big right now. That's a hot trend, and of course, if you're from New York or New Jersey, you're going to call it bar pizza and not give Chicago any props for that. But it really started there. So, and you had a guy, didn't you have a guy on your show that was sort of the historian, the Chicago pizza historian?
Peter Regas, yeah.
Regas, yeah.
He's a fascinating guy, and I mean, his knowledge is encyclopedic down to, you know, police blotters and city directories and whatnot. So
it sounds like the Scott Wiener of Chicago.
I think, I mean, he and Scott are kind of cut of a similar cloth, but I think that I think that Peter is he takes it to a different level. I don't know. I mean, you know, I've been having conversations with him by text over the past couple of weeks because I'm working on for a different project. Yeah. And I mean, you know, just the level of detail where, you know, I'm talking to him about the Tonos and this lore that, you know, it's open. It was actually started across the street from where it was, or talking about Lombardi's, and, you know, the level of detail for Filippo Malone. And I mean, who is, you know, he discovered as being this lost forefather of New York pizza. I mean, Peter will be able to say, well, you know, actually John Sasso was the sister, you know, the relation between a sister-in-law's nephew or something. And it's, I mean, he's incredible. He's a treasure in terms of pizza knowledge.
He'll peel the onion back to its core, you know, so with it, but it's pretty amazing. And there are people like that. And of course, that always is intimidating for someone like me who, you know, I've written about pizza without having any of that in-depth historical knowledge. So people assume that I know a lot about that stuff. And I'm always afraid I'm going to say something and I'm going to piss off somebody like, you know, Peter Regas, you know, just because I don't have those facts. And I spent a lot of time with Scott Wiener, you know, at Pizza University and at the Pizza Expos, and I always learn something new from him. And the same thing. I mean, he knows all this arcane knowledge about, you know, every aspect of the ovens and, you know, where it all started. I mean, he'll tell you stories that will mesmerize you. And you can hold an audience enthralled with stuff like that. If you're into pizza, if you're not into pizza, of course,
we're in trouble. But you still have a lot of fun, and that's how people enjoy his tours, because it can be as nerdy as it can get, but it can also be as accessible as it is. You know, Scott will be talking about you know, the details of, you know, don't actually freak out. Like, New York's coal ovens aren't, you know, this new law didn't actually restrict or damage the pizzerias. But then you'll see him lying down inside, you know, a coal oven, you know, with like that's less than 2 feet tall, and, you know, he's goofing around and just having a great time. So I think there's that level of accessibility where you don't go too far off the you know, fall off the peel there, just in terms of,
and I love that show that he did with what's his name from Dukoupil, where they would argue over whether this is really pizza or not. And so I think Scott is kind of like you and I are very ecumenical, and he loves all styles of pizza. So when he, you know, and I can relate to that much more than to there's only one way to do it, and this is it, and it's not pizza if you don't do it this way.
Well, Peter, you're also talking about, you know, writing and learning about pizza. And I think that Scott did the same thing when he was starting out. And that's my understanding. You know, he wasn't looking to rewrite the history of pizza. And I don't think really Peter was either. It was really just like pulling on a thread or asking a question. And, you know, the results that's happened since, and you know this from going on your quest, maybe not looking into, you know, newspaper archives or city directories, but it's really like, okay, well, I just want to understand, like, oh, so 1905, let me just go look this up. And, you know, then all of a sudden you're finding out, like, wait a second, this doesn't add up. And I think what, you know, on my own research over the past couple of years, as I've gone down my own series of pizza rabbit holes, it's really, I mean, it's really crazy because these stories build on themselves. And, Peter, you and I think when we're writing about stuff, we trust that somebody who has written about it in the past has, from reliable sources like the New York Times. And I'm not trying to bash on the New York Times here, but, you go back to Eric Asimov's piece in the 90s talking about the resurgence of New York pizza culture. And you've got a graphic there that shows the pizza family tree, and it lists things as facts. And, you then find out like, well, these things weren't true. But, you look back at the newspaper archives before that story was done, and the New York Times own archives say the same things. And so you're assuming like, okay, well, this is the gray lady, this is the all news that's fit to print, the great reputation for fact checkers and whatnot. But ultimately somebody had to make some kind of to do some research or write something down the road. And if you're referring to the same things over and over again, there's definitely a possibility for error there. That's what happens.
Well, I think, people love the story. They love the myth making of pizza. So whether you fudge a few facts here and there, whether Raphael Esposito really invented the margarita pizza or not, and things like that.
He didn't.
Most people, and most people don't care. They want the good story. That's all. And they want to be able to enjoy their pizza too. Which reminds me, Arthur, that you were very helpful and instrumental in my own pizza quest, because you introduced me to the guys in New York City that were doing that 12-hour rise dough. Didn't you write to me about
the Dodici?
The Dodici,
the Tommy DeGrazia at Sophia Pizza Shop. Yeah.
Sophia. And then Scott and I, did you join us there when we went and had we actually had it at Dodici? I'm not sure if you were able to join us when we went there.
I don't know if I was there with you guys
at Sophia. They made it for us.
That's great. I'm so glad they did.
And I'm wondering, is any updates on that? Is that thing still happening? Did it ever become a thing?
I think Tommy actually moved on from Sophia, so he still has the wine bar. It's called Sophia Wine Bar, and he does the Dodici there for special events, I believe. So you can still have it, I believe, on an infrequent basis. It was always kind of an irregular thing. I think what you're seeing, I wouldn't necessarily say that started a trend, but I think that's indicative of a ongoing trend that's been happening over the years of the longer fermentation times and the crumb structure that you're seeing and I think you look over at John Arena in Vegas, with his Sicilian, or you're looking at some of how Sicilian slices have changed.
That's right.
Just over the past 10 years or so since the Detroit phenomenon. I think it's indicative of where pizza has been where Sicilian and where thick crust pizza has been going.
Yeah, and a lot of that coincides with this new understanding among the pizza community about what fermentation is all about and how it can affect things. Alfred, you as you said, you didn't come in with pizza bona fides, but how much of this is rubbing off on you? And do you feel like you've been sucked into the rabbit hole now?
Oh, of course. And I think that, I have a bunch of interest, especially when it comes to history and things like that. And so there's always stuff that rubs off, but like diving in, especially, partnering up with Arthur, you can't not, I try to focus on the sort of audio aspect, the interview aspect, and, sort of the overall production of the show. But you can't not rub off. Like, Arthur has so much knowledge that is super helpful. And through Arthur, we've had we've been in the orbit of a bunch of other sort of real pizza experts that, of course, it rubs off on me. I always, and Arthur makes fun of me for saying this, I always want to remind people I'm no expert. There's a wave of certain people right now that are very powerful in the pizza world that express their opinions, and that's supposed to mean a lot, and they don't have the bona fides either. So I express my opinion, but I always want people to know that I could be entirely full of BS, because don't listen to me. I'll argue my points, and I have definitely lots of opinions.
It's a convenient caveat, Peter.
Exactly.
He gets to have his pizza and eat it too.
Exactly.
It's the perfect get out of jail free card.
Exactly.
At the end, you always say, "But what do I know?"
Right, exactly.
But I do think that it's because other people aren't doing that in the field. I feel like it's necessary to I don't want any business to lose it. My opinion doesn't matter. I will express it, but don't let it change your judgment either.
Arthur, are you doing another one of the 101 top lists?
So I've played with the idea over the years. I think after the current project that I'm finishing up, it's something that I'd like to revisit, but it wouldn't be for the daily meal. And I think I talked about a couple of years ago before I started this other project. I thought about doing basically 101 because 111 was always, I feel like it's a lot as it is, and you don't need any more. But at the same time, whenever I got to 101, there were always, and looking at the cuts, the way the panel had voted, it was always so hard to see, oh my God, these three places, which definitely deserve to be talked about as among the best pizzerias in the country, didn't make the list. That's insane. How could that be? So, and I think I would take a little bit of a different approach also to writing about the places. As brief as the blurbs would be, I wouldn't be much crazier with it, but I would like to revisit that project because I feel like there still isn't a great, I'm sorry, people may disagree with me, but I still think there is not a great national pizza list right now as good as that list was. And I know that sounds arrogant, but I feel like the panel of experts that we had voting year over year, and starting from, I think it was, in the 40s, and to having over 100 people. I think, Peter, you were, a panelist, as part of that project. I feel like that's not, I don't know, the 50 top list, I'm not trying to bash on it, but I feel like it's definitely an Italian-centric list that talks about, it really positions like the Italian pizza in this country. And I'm not sure that I think that, I don't know. I don't want to bash too much, but I feel like when I see the results that come out, it just doesn't, it makes me miss the old process and the people that we had involved in that project and the approach that we took.
Well, you could always, use Alfred's disclaimer at the end and go, but what do we know? Here's the list. What do we know? I know.
Or just have me make a list.
But remember when 20 years ago, there might not have been, because when I wrote American Pie, that's now over 20 years ago when that book came out. There weren't 100 pizzerias that you could put on a destination pizzeria list. And now there are well more than, there are probably in the thousands of great pizzerias across the country that have raised their game.
Can I push back on that with you, Peter?
Sure.
I mean, I feel like with Slice of Heaven, Ed Levine's book that came out, I think was it in 2006 or 2000?
It came out right after Year After Mine.
Okay, so I mean, I think that there were, in that book, I think I counted them. I think that there were, this is my level of insanity. I think that there were some 250 or 200 to 300 pizzerias that were mentioned in the book at that time. And so I could say like that was about 20 years ago or 19 years ago, or maybe, 18, maybe a little bit less than 20 years. Right. But I feel like there were enough places for Ed, who is, one of the old school original OG pizza writers to pull together that.
Yeah, he's as deep into the rabbit hole as you can get, Yeah. But yeah, so there were, and again, I think we all, kind of, at least those of us like you and I who are ecumenists, we feel like there's really no such thing as bad pizza. There's only levels of greatness, and I always say there's good pizza and there's great pizza, and there's thousands of good pizzerias out there, but that what I've noticed anyway, and maybe you can again verify or not, that the number of what I call destination pizzerias or pizzerias that make pizza that is memorable, has increased to another level.
That's definitely true.
And there's certainly, when anyone who's doing a list, even those people like Scott who've been to hundreds and hundreds of pizzerias, none of us have tried them all. And every region and every little village somewhere has somebody saying, no, our pizza, nobody knows about it. It's the best kept secret in the world, but this is the best pizza in the world.
Well, I know, it's funny. I mean, even in New York, right? I mean, this is my backyard. And since COVID, just because of the way jobs have happened or, the projects that I've been working on, I have not been to nearly as many places as I used to get to, where I would be writing about a place every day I did that for about a year on NYC Best Pizza on Instagram. I mean, I was looking through what I probably think are like the top 100 pizzerias in the city right now, and I probably haven't been to a good 20 of them or so that have opened up. I mean, and just this past 2 weeks, I've seen, Sarah's has opened up and it's getting all kinds of acclaim, and I think, and Diamond Slice now also in I think it's in Brooklyn, is starting to do stuff, and people are talking about those places. it's hard to keep up with. There are so many places opening, but that also brings me to one of my little, not grudges, but little chips on my shoulder that I have, which is about pizza writing. I'm gonna say it right here. I want to write a piece that's titled "Why every new New York pizzeria is the best new pizzeria in New York." It's like anytime a place opens, it's the best. It's the best new place.
Yeah.
And it's like it could happen, 3 weeks later, and there's another. This is the best place. I mean, it is that level of attention to detail and insanity here in New York.
Well, since we got a pizza expert here and a non-pizza expert here, a self-declared non-pizza expert here, give me maybe 2 or 3 of both of you, your favorite places, new or OG pizzerias that you would still consider, for people who are starting the quest, places that ought to be on their bucket list.
I think it's sort of like picking a favorite song where, or like a favorite movie where like at any given time you have a different top 4, top 5. So I think for me, I'll just give a few that I just absolutely adore. The Silo, which I talk about a lot in Lake Bluff, Illinois. That's right around where I grew up. It's this old school sports bar inside of a barn in, sort of on the outskirts, about 35 miles from Chicago. I just adore it. I love the atmosphere. And the pizza is more of a doughy, kind of a bready deep dish, but it's not crazy deep, but it's definitely deep dish. Oh, it's glorious. And that's probably my favorite.
Do you think it's on your list because you grew up with it and you have this sort of connection in an emotional, way? Or do you think, objectively speaking, if you brought in a bunch of pizza snobs, that they might also agree with you that, hey, wait, there's something special about this?
I think it's both. I think absolutely it's very good. And I think most people have it, even if it's not their favorite, I think they would acknowledge that it's different and very cool. But yes, I did grow up with it. But also deep dish is weird where I didn't grow up loving deep dish as a kid. It's kind of too much as a kid,
Yeah.
The chunky tomatoes aren't that appealing when you're a kid. You would rather something a little flatter. And so I got into it in high school. So I think that helps a little bit, but so that's my favorite. And then, one place I'm not a big, it might sound counterintuitive. I'm not a big Sicilian guy, but Spumoni Gardens, every time I'm in the Coney Island, that part of Brooklyn, once I went there for the first time, I fell in love with it. I think that pizza is so delicious. And then I think
because that one really is legendary, and yet it can also polarizing because a lot of people feel the opposite of you. So I've always wondered, and I haven't gone deep into it as I should have, but what it is about Spumoni Gardens, why it kind of like grabbed that cachet when they kind of break a lot of the rules.
Yeah, and there's a sweetness to it that I normally wouldn't love. For some reason, it hits all the notes perfectly for me, and I don't know why. It's like, again, I wasn't looking forward to it. I was like, I don't even like Sicily. I don't know why we're doing this. Oh my gosh, I love it. And then probably like, I guess you have to go back to like a Joe's and in New York City. So those 3 are the 3 I think about a lot. And again,
what was the third one?
Oh, Joe's in
Joe's. Yeah. Joe's always just keeps bobbing back up.
I know.
And it's right around the corner from John's. How would you guys compare Joe's and John's for people that, again, who are coming to New York and never been there? I got to choose one or the other, or go to both, or what?
Well, it's slice and whole pie, right? You've got this dichotomy going on there.
And Joe's is all about the slice, right?
And John's is to me more like a Midwest place where it's like a bar hangout, whereas Joe's is very New York. You get the slice and you go on your way. But yeah, I love John's for the fact that you hang out, get a pitcher of beer, and hang. That's what I grew up, having.
I mean, it really has the longest ties to, early pizza making in the city also. And so that's one of the reasons why, and
Joe's does or John's?
John's. I mean, that's part of what Peter Regas has found is, you can date that arguably back to 1915, definitely 1916. I like to do this kind of like by the slice. So 8 places. That's, for each. So a place, I usually say Joe's is as the baseline, so it doesn't even get included in that because otherwise you're just talking about Joe's. But so you got to go to Una Pizza Napoletana because you got to have that. That
came in number 1 on your last list, didn't it?
Yep. And then you've got to go to John's a Bleecker to have that old school vibe and to have that connection to history and to do the whole pie kind of thing. I think you have to go to Mama's too to understand where slices, new school slices have gone to. I think you need to go to Lindustry for that also for that elevated experience. Those two places. My under the radar place that I like to talk about is Margarita Pizza in Jamaica. It's everything that probably Scott does not like, which is it's out of balance. It's super saucy. It's super cheesy. It's not structurally sound with all of those toppings, but there is an indulgence there that I really appreciate.
Yeah.
And just
When you say Jamaica, is it Jamaica or Jamaica
Queens.
Plain? Oh, it's when Jamaica
Queens.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can basically get off the Long Island Railroad at the Jamaica station, and you can walk about 15 minutes, and you're right there. And it's just a place where people go for after school slices and whatnot. But and commute slices. I think LMB Spumoni to understand the Sicilian and where that kind of originated. Although I would argue that the plain slice I've enjoyed there actually really it's sometimes better than the square. And
hardly anyone ever talks about the plain slice there.
Interesting.
100%.
Yeah.
And also you have to have the Spumoni. I mean, to really understand that place. And then Louis and Ernie's is the last place that I like to throw people to because it's got this, old school approach. It's been there for a long time, it's got its origins stretching back to the 40s, but there's a distinctly New York approach, a different approach to sausage there that you don't see in the rest of the New York, because usually you've got the medallions that are on the slices, and there you've got the crumble that's more akin to Chicago. And Adam Cuban is really the one that kind of put me onto that, and I think really put that place on the map years ago.
So at Louis and Ernie's they do a more of a crumble. Did you say?
Yeah, it's a crumbled sausage. It's it's the place that I like to go to. It's long time ago, I did some research about what's the best pizza around Yankee Stadium. And what I found out was there is no great pizza around Yankee Stadium. And there certainly isn't great pizza in Yankee Stadium every time I've tried to have pizza there. But that is the place after going to see a Yankee game that it's worth going to have some pizza at Louis and Ernie's.
Interesting. So is that up in the Bronx then?
It is up in the Bronx. It's up over in the corner, though. You're not going to just kind of walk out of Yankee Stadium and then head over to Louis and Ernie's. It's really like, hey, we need a car. We need to take an Uber over there.
Well, you guys are based in New York and the New York area, and not all of our listeners and followers have been there and have that in their sort of repertoire of experiences. But it's funny how New York kind of serves very well as a focus and a metaphor for the greater pizza universe that everybody's partaking of. And when you described your different styles of pizza, let's go back to Una Pizza Napolitana, which is relatively new compared to some of these old guard places, but now he's been around for over 20 some years. And Anthony was when he burst on the scene 25 years ago, he was known as the pizza Nazi, right? Because he had a very specific, no nonsense style, and don't ask for pepperoni when you come in here. And now he's become, the lovable.
Now he's got grocery store frozen pizza. So
he's got frozen pizza. Yeah. And a lot. And
although arguably with his same meticulous approach. So let's be clear.
Yes, arguably, but the idea is that he created a brand. Yes. And yet he's still there hands-on in his place. But what is it about? Let's just focus on that, because the two pizzerias that I hear the most about these days, aside from is Una Pizza Napolitana and then Raza over in where is it, in Jersey City?
Yep.
So what is it about those two places that have allowed them to stay at the top of the pyramid?
Well, I think both of them.
Have you had both of those?
I was so sad you asked me that. I was so hoping I would get away with not answering that question.
I see you sitting in the corner. So you haven't had Una Pizza Napolitana?
I have not. I feel terrible.
That's all right.
It's a hard get, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I mean, like the reservations, it was funny because I went about a month and a half ago again for the first time in a while. And I went with Steve Dolinsky, who's coming in from Chicago. And I was like, oh, he's like, do you want to come with me? And I was like, yeah, sure. I was trying to get a reservation. I wasn't like, sitting there when the reservations came up, like refreshing, but I had tried casually to get just a seat at the bar by myself, after my kid goes to sleep for about 6 months and wasn't able to find a reservation. I joked with Steve, oh, you rolled into town and here you go. You got your reservation.
Right. Who are you sleeping with?
But, I think having that, I had the casaca there, and I hadn't ever had that. That was my first experience with that. And if you haven't had that, that's basically just a marinara pizza with a dusting of Parmigiano Reggiano on there. But very simple. But I was reminded, it's just, he was there making the pizzas, and the dining room was full. Everything was just, I think it's execution and attention to detail. And as Dan likes to say, and he says it in his book, name your intention. I think Dan is very present with everything that everything that happens with his restaurant. As soon as he finished writing that book, yes, at Raza, he wanted to tear up the book and start all over again, he told me. So I think that speaks to, and you look through the rubrics that he has in his book, where he lists like dozens of different elements, where you're like, does it have this flavor? Does it have this viscosity? Does it have an aftertaste? Does it have a whatever those different things are? I'm putting words in his mouth because I don't remember them offhand. I think it's attention to detail, and caring.
And that's not something you find in every pizzeria in the world.
Definitely not.
And any pizzeria in the world. I mean, he approaches it the way a Michelin 3-star chef would approach the menus at their restaurants. And I think the key word you just said there is care. How much he cares.
And you're seeing more and more of these chefs obviously coming into this space too. It's like, people, Peter, I want to turn a question on you, because that people always ask me, which is, and I don't mean to take over your show. I'm sorry, I can shut up.
That's okay.
But which is,
you got a podcast, you know how to do that.
Do you feel like there's a pizza bubble? Do you feel like the pizza bubble is going to burst? Because I feel like people have been saying this for 20, they ask me this all the time, and I'm like, okay, well then you tell me, what's this all about, these, former 11 Madison chefs that are going and opening up a pizzeria on the Lower East Side? Or tell me about this new pop-up, just after we see Chrissy's Pizza, which was a pop-up that started during COVID. Now he goes brick and mortar, and now you see the next generation of the pop-ups, or you see, New York Times former critic Pete Wells say something like, the best pizzas right now in New York are being served at pop-ups. And then you see this Diamond Slice now. It's like, no, do I think that places are going to close? Do I think the old school places some aren't going to make it? These Ferdinando's Focacceria, which isn't necessarily a pizza place, but is over 100 years old, just closed, I think, a couple of weeks ago. And I think that's horrible, and it makes me very sad. But do I think that means that the pizza bubble is popping? No, you see more places opening up. It's crazy.
I know, and it's so funny that you asked me that question, because it was on my list here of questions to throw back at you. Have we plateaued? Was my way of saying the question, and I'll give you a thought, and then maybe you just answered it. You just answered the question by saying no, you don't think there is a bubble that's about to burst, but I think that something has changed, and that is that we've reached, I would call it a plateau, from which there may be another leap going forward, because that's why I like going to events like the Pizza Expos, is you see, okay, what's coming 3 to 5 years down the pike that hasn't burst on the national scene yet? Is there anything more to discover, anything new that can be discovered about pizza? And one of those is in this new generation of young startup pizzeria operators is this idea of attention to detail and caring, this caring notion. And I wrote about in my first book, in American Pie, when I interviewed Chris Bianco, who was then the Dan Richer of pizza. He was the new kid on the block. Now he's the grand master now. But when he talked about what made his pizza so good, why are people going crazy over your pizza? Can you teach people to do pizza the way you do it? And he said, I can't teach people how to make pizza. He said, I can teach people how to make pizza. I can't teach them to care as much as I care. That was almost the climatic moment of that book, was when he said, I can't teach people to care as much as I care. And that is the differentiator in his mind. And I think that idea has definitely translated into the whole pizza community. And we see that at the various gatherings of pizza greats, is that all these guys have this level of passion and caring that elevates their work and turns it into not just, a business, but into a craft. And I think there's this notion, and Tony Gemignani, has popularized the phrase, respect the craft. I think the craft has been a breakthrough concept for pizza operators. And so we're still feeding off of that, I think, and we'll be feeding off of that for a long time. And as long as the craft is there, it's never going to go away. It's just a matter of, is there any room for more growth?
No, I think you're right. I mean, I think, but you know, when I look at Google Trends from time to time to track where just mentioned, and this doesn't necessarily a hard and fast answer to the question, but it's an indication of where things are going. And the mentions of pizza since Google basically started, with its algorithm in 2004, it goes back tracking. You see the pizza interest in pizza over time just continues to go up, and it goes up until I think about 2016, and then it goes skyrockets, and then it kind of starts trailing off to where we are now, and where we are now is where before it took off in 2016, the number of mentions is where it was. And so, I think it's going to keep going down from there? I kind of doubt it, but maybe it will, but I think it's probably going to go on a slow up creep. All I can tell you is three blocks away from me here in the East Village, there is a Chicago restaurant group that opened up in New York City, a Tokyo style pizza place. If that doesn't perfectly encapsulate where I think we're going to continue to go, I don't know. And it's packed. I don't know what will, because that is such a niche level of interest. Peter, would you have said 20 years ago that there's going to be a packed dining room for that level of niche pizza nerdism? To me, it's crazy.
You could sense that it was a wave that was still miles offshore, but that it was headed to the shore, but you just didn't know when it was going to break. Have you been there, Arthur?
I haven't, because I tried to go after Una Pizza, and I went and I just goes, oh, it's open, let's go, Steve. And it was an hour and a half wait.
Couldn't get in. Yeah.
No, but you know what? We went around the corner, and another line place that happened to be open. The Brad, oh God, what's his name? The Bradley Cooper / Angelo's collaboration, the cheesesteak, they've opened up in the East Village. Yeah, but they've opened up. So they've opened up. Yeah, they've opened up the cheesesteak place in the East Village, but guess what they have in the back? Pizza ovens. Yeah. And they had pizza boxes on the wall, so maybe it's just a matter of time before we get pizza there too. But I was able to get that cheesesteak, and that cheesesteak was awesome.
Interesting. Well, yeah, Angelo's is again another iconic brand out of the Philly community. So before we run out of time, let me ask you guys this: you've got a new season of Pizza Pod Party, right? You had some great guests during the last year. I was just going to read off my list of some of the cool guests that you had. For people who want to go and listen to the first season, you had Andrew Zimmern on the show, right? Susan Orlean. That one fascinated me. How did you get Susan Orlean? Did you know her, Alfred, or how did you get her on the show? I would kill to have an interview with Susan. She's with you. For those who don't know, it's the Orchid Thief and many other things. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm lucky. I've been doing broadcasting since college. And so I have a good couple decades of producing and working with, national shows. And I'm a producer. So I'm not bad at, I might not be a pizza expert, but I'm not bad at finding contacts, and pizza is a good topic where people like talking about that stuff. And I made it clear that it's no pressure situation and we're just going to talk about sort of their view of pizza and not sort of quiz them on any of the sort of foodie elements. And so, we've been really lucky, and, there's ways to get those guests that are my little.
Well, given what's happening with the Angelo's connection, maybe you get Bradley Cooper on.
There you go. You got to start working on that now.
You working on it?
But we'll see.
But in the first season, you had Candace Bushnell,
a Georgetown alum. We both went to Georgetown, but I did not know Bradley Cooper at Georgetown.
But that's a good icebreaker for you.
There you go.
Yeah.
Get him. I mean, the door's open right now. This is the time when he's hungry for publicity for the restaurant. You had Mo Rocca. What was that like? What did you talk about with Mo?
He's great.
One of my favorites. He's a perfect guest because he's funny, he's really smart, and he has really fun takes on pizza. A lot of the culture about pizza, he was very fun at talking about. Speaking of Georgetown and DC, he was one of the guests. We talked about the jumbo slices. DC as a neighborhood, and Arthur knows more about this, but they have served these giant slices, and it's basically the area in which drunk college kids go after a night out and eat these slices. And so you ask him, who went to Harvard, who's from DC, about that area, you kind of maybe expect him to be above it all. And not only was he not above it, he partook in that and would talk about how that beer pairs best with shotgunning a beer.
Yeah.
So he was just very eloquent about talking about very lowbrow things. So that's like a perfect recipe.
And let's be clear, the other thing that we discovered when talking with Susan Orlean was that she is actually a pizza writer. That may not be well known, but
No. What
but
does she
in
write
the
about
episode,
pizza?
if you listen to that episode, you will
okay.
find out she really is a pizza writer. I'm just telling you.
Awesome. I'm going to go listen to that episode as soon as we get off. Who else have you had on? Tony Dukoupil from the CBS Morning News.
Yeah.
And he's a guy I know that I watch that show every morning. That's sort of how I get my day going. And I know he likes to cook, but I didn't know. And he's got opinions. Some of them are a little bit weird about food. But did he have anything kind of cool to say about pizza?
You know, he's just so handsome, you get lost in his eyes. I mean, that guy, my goodness, he's a tall drink of water and that face. He was built in a lab to be a news anchor. No, he was fun too because his wife, Katie Tur, is also on MSNBC. And, you know, they were talking about hosting pizza parties in their house in Brooklyn. And so, you know, that's one thing too. Guests that are used to live broadcasts are really good on podcasts because they are really good at talking and expressing themselves in a very sort of efficient way. So he was great to talk to.
Well, it's cool. I mean, these are like really, it's like A-list guests that you've had. Do you have any cool guests lined up already for the new season?
We do, and we're being a little because, you know, we're want to have sort of a bit of a mystique about this one. We've already talked to a couple people, I will say that are the same ballpark as what we've already done. Really fun, funny, well-known people and then we're going to casually start releasing stuff. We know we're not under contract right now, so we have the freedom to sort of, maybe we won't be every single week, but maybe we will focus on quality as opposed to quantity. We'll see. But
you don't have a launch date then, or do you have one?
We're looking early spring, I think. We're looking.
Coming around.
Yeah, well, it's coming around. It's coming.
Guys, it's early spring is like happening right here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, breaking news right there, Peter. There you got it. You heard it here first.
But it's kind of it's a great sort of a general idea. Early spring could be anytime you want it to.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, we've done some recordings. I'll say that, with some really great people. We've had a couple really fun conversations that I'm starting to get very excited to release. So we'll be on our own pace. So we'll get stuff out there.
If you get stuck for a guest, let me know. I'd love to come on your show.
Oh,
and we'd love to have you.
We always find great excuses to bring on a pizza expert because we try to do more culture than sort of the foodie elements. But yeah, we've had a great time bringing on pizza experts to to color in a segment. So we will be in touch for sure.
Well, let me know, and
Absolutely.
I'll end every sentence by saying, "But what do I know?"
It's a great way to do it, I find.
You had a show. You've had some shows. I'm just looking at my list of things that jumped out at me. You did a show on religion and pizza, and also music and pizza, and then movies and pizza. Right? Were those different shows, or was that all in one show?
The music and we did music and movies were two separate full shows. The religion one, we talked to John Fugelsang, who's a comedian and radio host and actor. And we got into religion with him only because his father was a monk and his mother was a nun who fell in love, who left their vocation to start a family. So he's like an encyclopedia of Catholicism. So we talked to him about religion and pizza, but that was explicitly what the episode was about, but we touched on it.
But he touched on it because I want to listen to that because I was a monk and my wife was a nun. So.
Exactly. Wow.
So,
I mean, amazing.
I think we should do that though, Peter. I think, Alfred, we should do that. We should do a religion and pizza episode. I mean, we did touch on it in a different episode also when we talked about the symbolism associated with the spiral and applying tomato sauce on the pizza, and the spiral being one of the oldest symbols, associated religious symbols that you can find, and what that means. So we did do that. We did do a segment, but we didn't do a whole thing on religion. And I think there's dietary stuff that would fall into that. You could say, like, what would you do an episode on religion and pizza? There's definitely there's plenty of stuff to do with religion and pizza.
I mean, Friday, it's a perfect Lent food. It's the perfect Lent food. Friday cheese pizza. It's perfect.
That's right. And it is. And pizza is, in a sense, a perfect metaphor for so many things. Of course,
for some people, pizza is a religion.
Well, I think you're right about that. There's one other guest you had on last year I wanted to ask you about. You had Guy Raz from How I Built This on NPR. What did he talk about building pizza?
He was one of those guests that, like I mentioned before, we have guests that sometimes are like, will ask us before saying, I don't know that much about pizza. What are we going to do? And then we always find great stuff. Guy was one of those people that like knew so much. So he just was, you ask him one quick question, he will give you the encyclopedia of what he's so knowledgeable about so many different things. My favorite aspect about that was when he was talking about being an embedded journalist and trying pizza in very obscure places and having a real rough go. Those are great stories that he had. So those are fun.
Yeah, well, you had a great season. 50. You did one a week. Really? That was amazing.
That was every single week, 52 weeks in a row.
Because it's just like being in the pizza business. It's an endurance race. To be able to do it. Everyone can do it once. Everyone can do a pop-up, but can you do it week after week after week? And so maybe finally, just to get us out of here, what would you say were like the best couple top learning curve things that you got out of that first season that we should see showing up in the second season? I mean, you've been producing for a long time, so you already had a learning curve under your belt. But in doing this show, what did you see kind of emerge as you did them that will inform the next season?
I think being very aware, and especially early on, I wanted to make sure someone had been on the record, a guest had been on the record talking about pizza. I think now I barely even look into anything they've ever said about pizza, because now I'm pretty confident. I have an assumption that they have opinions about pizza, and we can talk to them about their childhood and pizza. And, even if someone's a vegan, we find that there is so much you can talk about still, because it's just such a ubiquitous part of life, and people grow up with such different takes on it and also similar takes on it that just really informs who they are. And it's a great way to find out about the person. So I think that's something, is just like not caring whether or not they have opinions about pizza, because we're going to find out their opinions about pizza no matter what.
Right.
And as long as we focus on getting really fun, interesting, and smart people, we're good.
I mean, it really is a show about the people. It's about you and people having interesting conversation. Pizza is just the hook.
I don't like saying that out loud, but it's a show about pizza, of course. But really, it's a show about Americana, about being human, about just how people go through life, really, and their sort of life journey is also their pizza journey.
Do you have like a wish list of guests that you haven't yet hooked, for the show and booked, but that would be like your dream list of a couple of guests that you just would love to have on the show, or have in your little cafe, sitting around with beer and pizza, just talking?
Oh, yes. I mean, there's a few people that we've gotten maybes from that I am still obsessed with. Conan O'Brien has always been a hero of mine. I would love to talk to him. I've, reached out. We've been in talks. Another person is Michelle Obama. And like, that's an obvious to a lot of people, but her background in Chicago, coming from the legit South Side, her initiatives in the White House, being talking about food so much. I think and I've heard her on podcasts, and she's just a wonderful guest. She's the dream of mine. But I'm curious to know how Arthur answers this question.
Well, I mean, one of the ones that Alfred knows this, that I just think it would be fun to do, and it's kind of similar when we talk to George R.R. Martin. Is I'd love to talk to Stephen.
I didn't even mention
I'd love to talk to Stephen King about pizza. Like, this is somebody who, like, I read his books ever since I was a kid, and he's got such a wealth of experience and I think perspectives, and he's always making comments on social media. He's somebody that I would just love to just have a conversation about pizza with.
That would be.
We're working on it.
Yeah. Well, good luck. We'll be looking forward to all those. And
Thanks, Peter.
I was thinking, have you had Stephen Colbert?
No, he would be wonderful. The thing is, I'm also very aware of people's schedules. As someone who hosts a late night show, sometimes the effort that goes into trying to book that person is very tough. So Conan no longer does his late night show. He does his podcast. So it's a different schedule. So, I mean, Colbert would be amazing, but
he's a busy guy, but he does go on podcasts, and he's got a book. He's got a book to sell. So so now's the time again.
That's a good point.
Opportunities there, and also if you can't get him, get his wife. She'd be great. I think getting Evie, Colbert would be kind of a cool get.
Yeah,
and she probably would love to have a show where she gets to talk without him interrupting her all the time.
That's a great point.
All right. Well, if you score that one, let me know, because
absolutely. We'll let a lot of people know. Sure.
Well, Alfred Schultz, Arthur Bovino, thank you so much. Your podcast about to launch sometime this spring is Pizza Pod Party. Check it out. Where did you go to pizzapodparty.com to get sort of into the archive or what?
You can, myself, Alfred Schultz, Arthur Bovino, we're on social media. Pizza Pod Party is on Instagram and on Twitter, whatever we're calling it these days. We're on TikTok. So Pizza Pod Party.
Pizza Pod Party.
So you can get
Look on the Google, you'll find us.
Just
you can find the podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all the places that you get your normally.
And when I did that Google search, it took me to a place where I could see all 52 of your first season episodes or listen to them. And I started listening to some of them. And I'm looking forward to listening to some more, especially after today and hearing some of the cool conversations you've had. Sounds like you're having a lot of fun with it. Congratulations on getting through your first season. And as they say, can you do it again? So do it again.
Peter, thanks so much for having us, really.
Yeah, seriously. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
For someone like me who's outside the food world, to even be included in a conversation with someone like yourself is a big deal. So thank you so much. I really appreciate that, Peter.
Thank you. And thanks for joining us. And thank all of you who are listening and watching. We'll see you on the next episode of Pizza Quest. Until then, may your pizzas all be perfect.